All right, let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is a standard bait barrel. This one can be a metal barrel or it can be a plastic barrel with a round hole or a square hole. We will talk about both and the pros and cons about both of those. So our standard bait barrel is just a hole cut in the middle or maybe in the top or maybe in the bottom where a bear can come in and he can rake the food out. The strategy here is to get that hole big enough that the bear can get in and get the food out, but not so big you can get a head stuck in there, or maybe so big that they're just going to rake it out on the ground and they're going to go through it a lot quicker. The best thing to do is to slow those bears down the best you can and to try to keep them coming to the bait for longer. So if you have a big hole, it's definitely going to speed them up. Now, a smaller hole won't slow them down a lot. Besides, the more they have to work for it, the better. You don't want the hole so small that they can't get the food out. If they can't get the food out of the barrel, they get upset, they get angry, and that's usually when you'll find a barrel missing down the hill, or they'll twist it off, they'll rip holes in the barrel, and a lot of times they'll get it ripped off the tree, and you'll be searching for your barrel the next day. All right, the next item we want to discuss is a round hole versus a square hole. I don't think there's really a lot of difference here. We've went to these square holes just because the way we build our bait barrels is with the tab system. So we will cut an X in the barrel and we will fold those tabs back. So we have a nice round edge right here. We don't have any sharp edges. Now this is nice if you're packing a barrel, you can grab a hold of that hole to help hold it or to carry it. And it's also nice that you don't end up with a bear that has rubbed all his hair off from reaching in and out of that hole with sharp edges. Eventually those sharp edges are going to get normally the guy packing the barrel. They're just a lot sharper and they're not as good as having a nice round edge. Now in a round hole, I've seen guys line it with hose material, or maybe even just round it with weld flat bar on the inside, or maybe even a piece of pipe on the inside. So they get that edge and then they spend a lot of work grinding it and getting it smooth. You can do that too. That don't really matter. This is just 10 times quicker. And all right, let's talk about hole location and why we're choosing to put it in almost the center of the barrel, just a little bit above half. And the reason we do this is because if we go right underneath this top rung, that's still high enough that you can get plenty of bait in the barrel, but it's not so high that the bears can't reach the bottom of the barrel. Now on this 30-gallon drum, normally I would go a little bit higher up, but I was doing this barrel as a sample. So this is one that sits in our retail showroom, and it's a smaller barrel, so we can kind of just explain, hey, here's how we do it. Normally I would go a little bit higher on the 30-gallon because it's a little lower to the ground. A barrel like this, we've got a good distance here that those bears can still reach the bottom of the barrel. What we've learned is if they can't reach all the bait, that's when they start moving that barrel like we spoke about earlier. That's when they start really wrestling that barrel and trying to get all that bait out of there. Now, if you can attach to your tree really solid, I love that idea because that'll buy them time. It'll buy you a ton of time, just because those bears will sit there and fight in that barrel and try to get the rest of the food out of there, and they'll come back for days. If you can't get that barrel super secure, especially between like two trees or something, don't matter whether you lag it or what you do, it's going to be ripped off the tree. That's why we chain the barrels, is so at least we can put it back up where it needs to go and it's not completely missing. We've had barrels ripped off of trees, rolling all the way down to the bottom of a canyon, because once they get those barrels off, they just continue to play with it and roll it, expecting it to feed more food. That's one reason we go right here in the middle rather than up here in the top, is just so the bears can get the food out and they don't mess with the barrels quite as bad. Okay, the other thing with using tie down straps is we normally don't coat them with any sort of paste or syrups. We don't spray them. We try to leave our tie down straps pretty scent free as best we can, meaning we're not spraying them with our scents or smearing stuff on them. And we just don't have a lot of trouble with them chewing them or messing with them at all. This is all personal preference. This is just our opinion. There's 1,000 different ways to do these bait barrels. Even with the lid, with your hole locations, it's really all personal preference. There's some small factors that factor in, but it's not a big deal. That's what's so cool with baiting bears, building barrels, is you get an opportunity to try different things. We've tried a lot of different styles of barrels. We've did all kinds of feeder barrels. We've did half barrels, and I like certain things about all of them. But we usually always come back to a style like this. Now, the reason we don't go, like we said, in the top is just because they can't reach. So it just makes them frustrated. You can put a hole here on the bottom, just a small hole, so they have to reach in there and get out a little bait at a time. But what we've noticed is when your bears come in, they lay down. First thing they do is lay down so they can dig bait out of there. And they have really no reason to stand up. Once they lay down, they can just sit there for hours and pull bait out of that barrel. We want them to be able to stand up. When they stand up, to get in this hole right here, that's when we can get our shot. Now, a lot of times they'll still come in and lay down, even with a hole like this, but once they eat a portion of the food they've raked out of the barrel, they stand up. So every few minutes they're standing up to get more food out of that barrel. And that's when you get those shot opportunities. If you put a hole too low, those bears will come in, they'll plop right down. And if you don't get a shot before they plop down, it more than likely is going to get dark on you before you get that shot opportunity. So I don't like them being too low down here. It's just one less opportunity we might get on that big boar if he comes in and lays down right at dark. Okay, the next question we often get asked is a removable top lid or just a standard bait barrel or just a standard barrel that you have to cut a hole in order to fill the barrel. Really, the only point in using the removable top is so that we can pull those lids off in order to fill the barrel. The problem with this is when you get a removable top and you suck it up against the tree, you have to loosen that barrel away from the tree every time in order to get that lid off. And if your barrel happens to get pushed and jumped on and messed with a lot during the season from them trying to get it on the tree, if it tweaks that barrel, sometimes getting those lids back on can be a pain in the butt. So we have started going to a barrel that we've just cut a hole in the top, and we put some hinges on the top, and it can lift and close. That way, once we secure the barrel to the tree, we don't really have to worry too much about loosening that barrel. We can just keep those tie down sucked tight, or cable or come along chain, whatever you've used to secure your barrel. You can leave that barrel nice and tight, and we can just lift that lid and fill it full of bait and flip the hasp, lock it, we're out of there. The removable top barrels are nice because you can get a lot of bait in there quickly. That we've just had problems with having to, especially if you're on a steep side hill, if you loosen that barrel away from the tree, then a lot of times, you know, it's hard, especially for one person, it's hard to get that barrel nice and tight against that tree and get it sucked down tight again. All right, next let's talk about the size of the hole. So we do a 4.5 by 4.5 inch square. And I've got a template on our website of that. It's a little template. You can actually just tape right to the barrel, and you can drill your holes and fold your tabs in. It's done. If you want to build this bait barrel the way we do it, I've got this available on the website, or leave a comment below and I'll gladly make sure you get this template. It works great for most of the United States. Now, if you're baiting grizzlies or large Canadian bears, you might want to extend that to 5.5 by 5.5, just a little bit bigger hole. Our bears aren't as big as some of the bears you see in Alaska and in Canada. And so the 4.5 is kind of what we've optimized to be our best size without being too big or too small. It's worked great for us. Now, if you want to cut a round hole, that's okay too. I would keep it under 6 inches. Optimally around that 5-inch mark would be better. And same thing there. We have learned that it keeps animals from, or bears from getting, you know, especially cubs. A lot of times they can get their head pushed in and then they can't get their head out. So I would stick under 6 inches. I've seen guys, and we've done it too, do these 8 to 10 inch holes. And that's great. The bear can stick its head right inside the hole. So you have some opportunity maybe to, if you're drawn back in your tree stand, or, you know, you need to set up the shot, that is some distraction in order to get the shot you need. But the bait, unless you really fill that full of sticks to hold that bait in, the minute they pull those sticks out, it just all drains onto the ground. So I feel like anything over 6 inches is just too big. That's my personal opinion. We normally go 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches, and then we just do the square hole. That has worked great for us. It really don't matter. I don't see an advantage between a square hole and a round hole. It's totally your personal preference. The only other thing is, in order to do a round hole, it's a lot tougher if you're just using like a cutoff wheel. Where this, you can almost use a jigsaw, you could use a cutoff wheel, you could use a plasma, cut that X and fold those tabs back. So this is a lot easier to do, especially at home if you don't have plasmas, cutting torches, and things like that. You could also use like a router zip or a tool like that probably to cut that hole as well. But then you have those sharp edges you've got to deal with. So we're a big fan of the square hole with the tabs, and it's just worked really well for us. All right, securing the barrel to the tree. So we will normally cut some tabs in the side as well, identical to this. We just cut a mini X and we fold those tabs in. I don't think it really matters. You just need a spot you can run a chain through, or a spot you can hook your tie down hooks, your come alongs, cables, whatever. And we'll usually do that like 1.5 inch size hole, just enough we can get a tie down hook in there without being too big of a pain. And then we suck it up tight next to the tree. And normally we will do those holes in the side. So we're basically coming right around to both sides, and we're going to put a hole here, and we're also going to put a hole here, right here on this side. And then that way we can run our tie down hooks around the tree. And we do that on the top and the bottom. So I'll usually put a hole here, and I'll put a hole here on both sides, and we'll run two tie down straps and suck it up next to the tree. We haven't had a lot of issue with tie down straps. I know a lot of guys say they chew through them, and they've had a lot of trouble with just not working. Us personally, as long as our barrels have some bait in them, we haven't had a lot of trouble with the tie down strap. Now, what we will do on maybe a bait site that we've got some aggressive bears, or we've got a lot of bear action and they're just being really aggressive with the barrels, we'll run a security chain through there and just chain it loose, just so if those tie down straps do come loose, they can't roll the barrel clear down the hill. And then when we come in to rebait, we'll refix the barrel, chain it nice and tight, suck those tie down straps down, and make sure we've got that barrel secure against that tree. Okay, the other thing with using tie down straps is we normally don't coat them with any sort of paste or syrups. We don't spray them. We try to leave our tie down straps pretty scent free as best we can. Another good reason to have that barrel secure against the tree is to direct that shot placement. So if we have that bear is coming in broadside, our hole is right here, and our blind is set up perpendicular to that, then we get that nice broadside shot. If our barrel gets loose and maybe gets spun around the tree, a lot of times those bears are coming in right before dark, and if that barrel's spun around that tree, that's the same side the bear's going to go to, and you're not going to get that shot opportunity. So we want that barrel to be nice and secure, nice and snug. I've even seen guys that have went through the back right here and drilled lag bolts into the trees. Of course, always check your regulations, because Forest Service has restrictions against certain things like that. Check your state and local laws. Make sure your baiting rules comply with what we're teaching here. Every state is different as far as what kind of bait barrel you can use and how you can attach it to the tree. But with that being said, we want that bait barrel to be secure to the tree. We don't want those bears coming in and moving that barrel around. We don't want to chase it down the hill on a night we're coming to hunt, because we're going to spread scent all over the valley trying to get that barrel, get it back up the hill, get it attached to the tree. If we do show up to a bait site that barrel is missing, we just hunt. Those bears are still going to come check out that location. They may mess around with that barrel down the canyon, but more than likely it's empty because they've wrestled around with it all night. And once they kind of see that's empty, they're going to come up to that bait site tree in that location for maybe a few days after that barrel comes up missing. So if it's missing, don't go looking around for it. Don't spread your scent. Get in your tree stand or your ground blind, your shooting location, and just hunt that night. Come back the next morning, figure out your barrel situation. If you keep that barrel secure to that tree, you're always going to have the best shot placement. You're always going to direct those bears exactly where you want them, and for that broadside shot. A lot of guys will even want just a little bit of a quartering away shot. That's personal preference. We usually go for just a directly broadside shot, and that's worked really well for us. So in my opinion, I would keep those barrels nice and secure. Throw a safety chain on them or a piece of cable just so they can't rip them off. A couple ratchet tie downs from Harbor Freights work great for us, and just suck those barrels nice and tight against a tree. What works really well is if you can find two trees that are growing, maybe just enough that barrel fits right between them. You can really suck a barrel like that tight, because now you're not tying to that round tree. So it's easy for those bears to start spinning that barrel. So if you can get two trees that are kind of growing together like this and fit that barrel right between, now you can really suck that barrel tight into that, and those bears can't get it loose. All right, let's discuss color of the barrels. I really don't think, this is personal opinion. We do like to we've switched to going with these lighter colored barrels, just because when those bears come in, you can kind of help use the barrel as a reference for shot or for a size of judging the size of the bear. These lighter barrels, especially when the low light conditions, it starts getting later in the evening, a black barrel with a black bear, a lot of times you can misjudge because it's just hard to see the difference in size. So we want the top of that bear, we want the back of the bear to be about as high as the top of this barrel, or maybe even 3/4 up, just depending on what you're looking for. It's your personal choice on what size of bear you're shooting. But if you are looking for a large mature boar, you want their back to be pretty close to the top of this barrel. And if you've got a bear that comes in and he's only halfway up the barrel, that's not a shooter bear. That's a young bear. Being on a black barrel, that's hard to distinguish. So we like a light gray or a light blue or something like that. The only disadvantage with light colored barrels is other hunters, other people in the field hiking around, they see them, they're curious, they have to come up and look at them. and it just spreads more human scent around your bait barrel. I like to hide them. We used to camo, spray paint them and make them camo, and try to blend them in a little bit better, just so other hikers and recreationists don't see the barrels, just to keep from drawing attention to the barrel. But we like it a lot better when it's just a lighter colored barrel. We have a lot of kids that sit our baits, and it's just easy for me to tell them, what size of bear we're looking for in order to, shoot mature bears. We want it easy for those younger kids to be able to judge those bears, because bears are really hard to judge. It's an art, really. There's so many factors to judging a bear. Having a size reference for the barrel is huge for us. Now, you can lay the barrels down. You don't have to stand them up vertical like this. You can lay the barrel down as well and just chain it loose. The only drawback, in my opinion, to that is it is a little bit harder to judge the size of the bear that way. Usually if it's taller than that drum laying down, same type of deal, probably a shooter bear, but you want it to be quite a bit bigger than that barrel. You can still use that barrel as size reference, but it gets tougher. When you lay those barrels down, it gets tougher. And once again, if they can move that barrel around and they swing it around that tree, now come prime time, those bears are going to come the backside of that tree, and you may necessarily not have a good shot at that bear. If you choose to camo it up to try to hide it from people, and you can look at other characteristics, like how the bear's posture, how the bear walks. A lot of times a bigger bear will have a swagger to it when it walks. There's a lot more things you can use to judge the size of a bear than just a barrel. A lot of states don't even allow a barrel. Once again, that's why we stress for you guys to read through your regulations. Make sure your state even allows barrels. Sometimes they allow plastic barrels. Sometimes they allow metal. Sometimes no barrel at all. So make sure before you go out there setting up a bait that you know exactly all your rules and restrictions, and make sure you're not getting yourself in trouble. All right, guys, a lot of info to cover. I'm going to try to get this all down into one video. There's just so much little things to talk about with bait barrels that'll really set you up for success. I want to make sure I cover it all. So the next thing I want to talk about is plastic versus metal. Now, once again, check your regulations. Make sure you can use either or. In Idaho, for example, we can use metal only. We can't use plastic. But in Wyoming, just an hour away from us, we can use plastic barrels or metal barrels. And Wyoming requires you use a barrel at the time of this video, of course. You can't bait on the ground, where in Idaho, we have the option to use a barrel, but we can bait on the ground as well. So I always have to refresh my memory when I cross the borders into other states, just because every state is different. Some of the rules and laws out there are really ridiculous, but they're the laws. That's what we got to abide by. Anyways, talking about plastic versus metal, what we've noticed, I've got a chance to use both, of course, because we bait Idaho and Wyoming every year. So we hunt both states, and then sometimes we'll travel and do Canada and some other states. But our plastic barrels, slowly over many, many years, we have noticed the holes, they do get chewed on a little bit more, and those holes have starting to, come out of shape. It's not terrible. We don't go from a small 6-inch hole and now we've got this huge hole. But, a lot of times those bears, when those baits go empty, they will chew on those barrels a little bit. Otherwise, really the pros is the plastic barrels are a lot lighter. They're easier to pack in, easier to carry. Metal barrels, especially like a 55-gallon metal barrel, they're a lot heavier. All right, guys. Well, that's it for the basics of using a bait barrel. There's a lot of more advanced techniques and stuff that go into this, and we're gonna keep adding to this series. But really, the basics to get a guy started that's never maybe bear hunted before and wants to go out, you have all the tools you need to be successful on your first bear hunt. Really, it's pretty simple. We don't want to overthink it, but there are a lot of tips and tactics that kind of help shorten that learning curve for you. So make sure to like and subscribe. I've got a lot more content coming, and we'll see you in the next video.